Hello, YouTube and YTPC, how are you all doing? Well, this video is a follow-up to my last one, which was the tin opening of this 60-year-old Louis Dobbelmann Tobacco pipe tobacco, which is based on Cavendish, as it says, as a flake, and as you saw in my last video, it's a very broken flake and it was very dry, but it was actually in amazing good condition considering 60 years in that tin, and the tin itself was in very good condition, though it wasn't hermetically sealed and it wasn't under vacuum, but it did have a seal under the lid. But that's all in my last video, and this one, what I've done in the meantime is I've hydrated basically overhydrated it now. I've put one of these little hydro stones, which is just a ceramic terracotta disc. You've seen them before, which I boil in water to make sure it's sterile and put it in a jar this size. If I have a bigger jar, this size for example, then I would use two of them. And after about a week, I tried it, and this is the verdict in the next clip about how that tobacco smoked. Well, this is a first interim little videoette about how this hydration is coming along, and I'm just having a first smoke of it. Now, I expected this will take some time for to get the maximum effect, if there is an effect at all. So this 1 week with one stone in the jar, which is not much, but I can clearly feel the moisture here, and I think this is the healthy thing is the tobacco looks absolutely normal. You would not know that this has been 60 years in a tin, from the color and appearance and the consistency of the tobacco, and you see a bit of swelling on those flakelets, a broken flake, and it looks more and more like this is a flake that was made out of almost pure Cavendish, as the tin says. Might have had a bit of burley in it too, but really it's if I look, so you see this is reading about 48 here in my cellar, which is pretty dry cellar, and let's just put it on top of the tobacco and see where it goes in a few minutes, and I'll talk about what's happening to the smoke. So just half a bowl here in my meerschaum. What is definitely totally different is the amount of smoke that it generates, and the coolness of the smoke, and that it's not going so fast and out of control. So definitely the moisture has helped that. I can't really say I'm picking up too many or really any significant flavors. Probably is a little, because it's easier to smoke, a touch of sweetness, you know. Kind of wish that Jim Inks were here and he could have a go at it, because he could break it down in what is in there. And I have a moderately high threshold with flavour. In other words, if it's ultra subtle, it won't taste of very much anything to me. But it's the dynamics of the smoke are perfect. There's nothing untoward or unpleasant at all, or weird flavours, and as I said, there was not any trace of deterioration in terms of mould or that. It was just quite a bit desiccated, but if we remember, with the hydrometer said it still had about maybe 60% of moisture, which means it obviously over the 60 years it reached an equilibrium. And the tin was pretty well sealed. It was not hermetically sealed for water vapour, so it just leached out and reached an equilibrium. But what I also think is in the tin and the plastic bag, the oxygen level probably didn't get replenished. In other words, I think the tobacco didn't get over-oxidized, as if you would leave it open to the air, always fresh air with new oxygen coming along, it would then over-oxidize over a long period. But in that tin and with the inner bag, there was only a limited amount of oxygen, and the refreshment of the oxygen from the outside couldn't really easily happen. So it also reached probably a low equilibrium, and that's another reason why this tobacco, optically at least, in terms of texture, was in such good condition. So already, yeah, there's definitely a touch of sweetness coming through now. And I think if I slightly overdo the hydration, you know, I did this once with some dried out early morning pipe and one or two other tobaccos, and I overhydrated them. You know, they weren't swimming in water or anything. They were just probably up to the 80%, 85% relative humidity, and, you know, like wet towel sort of consistency. And then you take them out of the tin and you dry them for 15 minutes, 20 minutes or something. But I noticed that helps sweetness to come much more through. It might be that there's a little bit of fermentation going on in the jar if you're leaving it there for quite a while, or it just helps to release those sweet sugary components. Let's see, this is just the beginning, and at the end of this week I'll have another go with some overhydrated tobacco, and we'll see if we can pick up more flavours. I think it's a modest success in terms of the dynamics and the smokability of this tobacco. It's definitely now smokable. It won't overheat and won't bite you or anything, and starts to reflect what you would expect with a heavily brown Cavendish blend. Not many of those out there, I suppose, with a very high or pure brown Cavendish. We're more used to black Cavendish, but an unsweetened brown Cavendish isn't that sweet. So no flavours though of the Tokai wine that may have been a victim of the oxygen that was available. Although I think it was only lightly added because there's no vinegar either. So anyway, let's see. It's early days, and it's like I said, you know, it's a sort of 5 out of 10 in the sense that you could definitely smoke this now if you want a nice neutral smoke with, you know, just a kiss, half a kiss of sweetness, you know. But I think day for day and week for week it will improve. I'm pretty sure of that. Let's see. So the next stage is I put another hydrostone in those jars like this and overhydrated it to make it really very damp, because it was obviously going in the right direction, but it wasn't, I think, finished. It made an amazing recovery to look even more like fresh tobacco. You could hardly know that it was sealed for 60 years. It looks really quite normal now. If you, for example, look at this, it's just a bit over damp. But I was hoping that overhydration would open the cells of the cellulose, and anything that they had trapped inside them would be released in terms of flavour. And this is the verdict. So actually I'm smoking a Vowan Pipe Club of London 2021. A marvellous pipe that John Green offered to members of the club. Always a different one, and there's the emblem of the Pipe Club of London, which is laser engraved on the base of the pipe, and that's really lovely and quite distinctive style, as you see. Lovely silver band that has Pipe Club of London engraved on it, 2022. So and it's a Vowan white dot quality as well, so really good pipe. And still waiting for my Louis Dobbelmann pipe, but I will hope by the end of this video I can put on a clip of me using that to smoke this fantastic tobacco. Well, this video is about some astounding information that I found out about Louis Dobbelman. Not only did he create that factory and made these wonderful tobaccos and even pipes as well. The original Louis Dobbelman, born in 1837, is a war hero of the American Civil War. And this I found out just by chance in some comments about a book, and I have now bought that book, and will share some of the history in it with you. And if you rummage around the internet, you find this photograph. And luckily for us, his daughter, granddaughter actually, her name is Lisbeth Wesselaar Dobbelman. And she was actually a famous artist in the Netherlands. She wrote a book about this story that her grandfather was an officer in the Union 49th Illinois Regiment in the Civil War. And I'm going to tell you a bit about the story. Now, this book is beautifully written, but it's all in the Dutch language, which is a language I haven't used for a long time. So I was a bit rusty, but my German has helped me, and I've made some notes, and I will show you things as I go through the history. So are you sitting comfortably? And let's begin about Louis Dobbelman. Well, as I mentioned, he was born in 1837. He died in 1901. And around 1860, he decided to go to America. and there were some relatives and friends over there living in the area of Waterloo, in America, not far from St. Louis. And he decided to visit them, and it wasn't really clear why he wanted to do that. It was partly, I think, just to see these relatives, how they were getting on, and experience America. If you calculate that, he was 23 years old. Why not go west, young man, and see the world? So he set off on a ship, which was the Yaverland ship, in the 23rd of March 1860, and it cost him 150 guilders to make that trip. This is all documented in this book. There were some other sources that I used, and there will be a lot of links below. But anyway, he went to Waterloo in America and met up with a man called Ambrose Honer. But that was someone that he knew, and he thought that this would make sense to connect with him, and he could basically get him started. So he stayed in that town of Waterloo, and he opened up a grocery store. That wasn't really so successful for him, so a year later he closed that, 1861. That date is becoming prophetic, of course, regarding the Civil War. He was trying some farming and was working with another Dutch immigrant, which is, of course, what you would do if you emigrate to a country. You get to find some people from your own country, and they show you the ropes and they help you out, how you can make a living. And that's an important name. Van Drevelt, who were the family who was running this farm, and a man and his wife, and the wife was Maria Van Drevelt, and she's important later in this story. It's all like you could make a great TV story about this, because it's got everything in it. It's got war, it's got love, it's got tobacco, you name it. 1861. Well, first of all, let me show you some photographs. Now, there's quite a few I couldn't find on the net to download, so I will have to show you them in the book. And that is what motivated him to enlist. There were lots, of course, Uncle Sam needs you ads going on, and to rescue the country, etc. You are needed. And he was a young man, and he obviously identified with the causes of the Union and decided to enlist. And that same photo you saw on the cover is a larger version of it, and you will recognize him in some photos I'll show later as he got older, but it's definitely him, no question about that. And at the time, Lincoln basically needed 75,000 recruits and volunteer recruits, and there was a regiment that was set up for new immigrants, and had a lot of Dutch immigrants in it, and that was the 49th Illinois Volunteer Regiment. And there he joined up, and he achieved, or was given, the rank of sergeant. It was not clear if that was immediate, and he may have achieved that as he went through. As you will see, he was promoted several times, and the 49th Illinois Regiment really went through the wars, the various battles that he took part in. because he wrote letters back home, and those letters were obviously preserved and fed into this book. And for example, they kept his uniform, and at the time this book was written, there it is. That's his cap, and that's a pouch. I'm not sure if that pouch was for tobacco. It said it's a money pouch, but maybe it was for tobacco. Who knows? But that's his cap, and I'll show you another one a little bit later of his full uniform. This book was written in 1997, published then, when Elizabeth was very old, and she must have done great research and collected a lot of these letters and items that were still available. She couldn't have got much information from her father, or the son of Louis Dobbelman. His name was Louis Dobbelman, because he died when she was very young. So she must have got it from also other relatives. But it's extraordinary the research that she has done. The battles that he was involved in were at Donelson in 16th February 1862. He was in Pittsburgh Landing, that battle, on the 7th of April 1862. He was at Vicksburg in February 1864. He was 6 weeks or 2 months almost around the Vicksburg area, and his last battle that he was involved in is at Tupelo, which was the 14th of June 1864. So he really went through a lot of battles, and he became assigned to artillery, because in his letters there's a lot of information about the kind of artillery that was being used, and obviously artillery was a major part of his duties. In the 7th of June 1862, Louis Dobbelman was then promoted, and here I shall show you, and you see here that Louis Dobbelman is promoted to second lieutenant with the Illinois Volunteers. That's fantastic. So he was quite a soldier, if you think, at that young age in a new country. He obviously adapted very quickly, and he was had something of a talent for what he was doing. And it says he was promoted for his meritorious services. In other words, he'd been in a number of battles and obviously performed very well. He wrote a lot of letters, as I said, and his mother here, she made a comment that he had a very good sense of humour, because he would make jokes even though he was involved in battles and conflicts, and she said that's one of his characters, that he's always finding a way to keep cheerful even if things are tough, and that obviously helped him later in his business life. And of course, it wasn't easy for him. He was actually injured, and the book shows you here a discharge from the hospital. So the doctor has basically said he's fit for duty again and healed up, and he went back to duty. So, he was in the thick of it and got hospitalized because he was injured there. And here I just want to show you what I mentioned before. This is his full gala uniform. And they still had it after all those years. Can you believe it? From Louis Dobbelman. Quite amazing. Well, as things went on, that was not his last promotion. The last promotion was to First Lieutenant, Illinois Volunteers. So he was obviously continuing to do a great job, healed up from his injuries, and became a first lieutenant, which was quite marvellous. There are also certificates of his citizenship and one of his passport at that time. Now, the war, of course, finally ended, and another mystery is he decided to go back to Holland. He would have made lots of contacts, and he maybe found out things about tobacco, America being the major producer of tobacco at that time. It's not entirely clear why he left, but in the summer of 1865 he sailed back, and August the 1st he started a company. He actually took over a tobacco company called Van Woerden Co. in Hoogstraat in Rotterdam, and that would be where his new factory was built. And most interesting, he had a love affair with Maria van Drevelt, and her husband had died, so it's all above board. And she was a widower, and she decided to come back to Holland as well. And they took up contact, and 23rd of October 1869 he was married. And here is the certificate or the announcement of the marriage. And there you recognize Louis from his eyes. He was a little older then. And Maria was a very pretty lady, and she had 2 daughters already, and 1/3 daughter is from their marriage at that time in 1869. So Louis was here 32 years old. And the family grew, and he was a very successful businessman with pipes and tobacco. And here's a few years later, the family all together, and there's Louis again with a beard now, and he's obviously doing very, very well. And talking of that factory, now I think I showed this before, but this was a magnificent factory, wasn't it? Turn of the century it was built, and it must have been for those days absolutely huge. And this is one of the brand pictures that you found on some of the tins, like this one here. And Dobbelman became a brand that was number 3 in continental Europe at the time, which is a major achievement. So that was a fantastic period at the end of the 1800s. And here's a picture of Louis. This is the one you'll probably easily find from internet, when he was about 55. And there's Maria as well, and they stayed together until his death in 1901. And actually, as well as all those daughters, Louis had a son, and he was also named Louis, and he called him Lou as his nickname, and he became the next owner of the factory when the original Louis Dobbelman passed away in 1901. And here's another picture of his son Lou with his wife, and that was about 1902. His father had already died, and he was now the owner of the factory. And the factory continued to prosper up to about the time of the war, and this was a turn of fortunes in many ways, because the factory, as I mentioned already, I think was bombed, and that beautiful factory was destroyed in Rotterdam before the Germans actually marched in. They did quite a bit of damage with bombing, and that was a terrible thing. It was destroyed, and his son had to actually basically find alternative ways to manufacturing, and that might be why they used a contractor to make some of the tobacco. You see here, if you look carefully at this tin, which I think is older than one I've got, probably shortly after the war, Oden Warland in Belgium. So they kept producing the tobacco, but using probably a contractor until they had the new factory facilities set up, which they did build after the war and continue. But one big tragedy is Louis Rommel Dobbelman, who was the son of Louis. He was born in 1911, died in 1943 because he was trained in America as a cavalry officer, and he worked for the resistance. And a great tragedy. This handsome young man, which I'll show you now, fine young man, really he was assassinated by a Nazi special unit. It was called the Silber Tanner exercise, where some, unfortunately, countrymen were recruited into that unit and sought out anyone suspected of being in the resistance and assassinated them. And that's why his life was short. He was only 32 when he was killed. And there are still plaques on the farmhouse where he lived, because he was mainly a farmer at that time, where the incident happened. And I just show you here a shot of the family grave, where Dobbelman's son Lou is buried, and also Louis Rommel Hubert Dobbelman, who was unfortunately killed. Well, that's just a taste really of what's in this book, and anyone who's got a bit of German, or if you're even a Dutch speaker, you will really find it interesting. I haven't done it justice. On the back there's this marvellous tin art of a best bird's eye tobacco. Really is totally beautiful, and it was really a shock to find this fantastic information and know everything about his early life in America and his service to the Union Regiment. Later on, the business didn't go well. There was, as there was not a son to inherit and go on. As I said, unfortunately, he was killed in the war. Another person was involved, not part of the family, and he wasn't that interested in this business. And as you approached the early 1960s, business was not going that well. And as I mentioned, one source says it was finally stopped in 1964. There was a move of some of the facility, I think it was the pipe making facility, to Ries in Germany, and the factory operated there for a few years, and I think was acquired by Oldenkott, who took the inventory, and that was the end of it. Pipe tobacco, I think, was stopped, as another source indicated, about 1962. So I hope it didn't bore you too much with all of those details, but I just personally found it, as a history study, quite fascinating. And it all of this thanks to Roy, who shared one of his tins with me and led me on to this marvelous discovery. So I've been talking and not smoking, and here is the overhydrated tobacco. I took it out for about 15 minutes to just dry it a little bit, and it's definitely gone a step further, better. Now, what I think has happened is the topping is mostly gone. I did get some sweetness and I did get some chocolate, and I think that is coming from the tobaccos, and that would make more sense that they would probably survive that period of years. And the topping, wine topping from the Tokai wine, not really. I couldn't really pick out anything that would indicate it's still there. But the tobacco smokes very nicely, very smoothly, a bit of creaminess, so there obviously is a lot of Cavendish, or wasn't a fair amount of Cavendish used. And I'm sure there's some burley in there with that chocolate touch. And it in terms of the mechanics of smoking it, it keeps light and it's easy to smoke, and there's no tongue bite, and there's definitely mild to medium nicotine in there. It's not strong at all, but you know, after a couple of bowls, you would say, oh, there's definitely a reasonable amount of nicotine in it. But already now it's pleasant, and if you want a just easy, smooth, mild smoke with a touch of sweetness and a touch of chocolate, it's good. So it's restored as far as I'm concerned. It's made the pass mark. You know, let's say 7 out of 10. But whether I can get it up to an 8 out of 10 with my own attempts to put a topping in there, I don't know. We'll see. It might naturally get a bit sweeter and more interesting with further aging in a jar. We shall see. So this is the day after, and I was hoping my pipe, Dobbelman pipe, would arrive, but it can take 3 weeks or even a month from America, and a lot of it is the issues. Used to be COVID, but it's also the customs. They sit on things for sometimes a week, so it didn't arrive. So I would like to send this video out. You've been waiting a long time for it, and right now I'm smoking some Louis Dobbelman rehydrated, but with a couple of cubic centimeters of port wine, sweet port wine, Portuguese, which I thought is an approximation towards that Tokai sweet wine. I did try to find some, but it's not so easy in Switzerland. But well, actually, it's working. It's really working. I had to open the lid and leave it open a few hours because there's, of course, water also in port wine, and let it dry and soak in, you know. But now I taste a topping. I could put a little bit more in, I think, because it's quite mild sweetness, fruitiness, a little bit grapiness, and the grapiness is what you want from Tokai wine. Smoking it in my Prince Savinelli X Bowl 315. I think this is either 9 or 6 millimeter. Lovely pipe. As far as I'm concerned, this is moved on now to 8. I think this is what I could say now is fully restored, not perfectly restored. I need some Tokai wine, and I'm still looking to try and get some, because I've got several other jars that I can play with. This is just the experimental jar, and yeah, this is how you do it. And all I did is distribute it in drops and move it around and continually tumble it with the lid on, and then just needs to be dried after that, because you've got then too much water from the port wine. But it dries out reasonably quickly, an hour or two, and it's almost right. It's not quite optimal, but it certainly has moved forward. So definitely for me, well conserved tobaccos from a great age can be restored, at least partly, to their former glory, and with a bit of work you can get maybe not too far away from how they originally were. I tried to keep this video under 40 minutes and failed, but anyway, I thank you all for your patience and those who are interested in this story, and I'm delighted now to smoke this beautiful Louis Dobbelmann Cavendish flake tobacco, and it's a great day. You all take care, look after yourselves. Bye-bye.